The opening week of region play is in the books, and boy, what a week it was. Now we move on to the second week of region action here in the 2021 high school football season, and it's going to be another special one as well. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Alec Etheridge, managing editor here at the Shelby County Reporter, and this is the Shelby County High School Football Show as we get you set for this Friday night's action. Look back to what we saw this past Friday night, a special night on the football field as we had two county battles, both of which went down to the wire. One went into overtime, being Briarwood-Chelsea in a very tight rivalry battle there. And then obviously at Pelham High School, taking on Calera, the Pelham Panthers come out on top, a goal line stand at the end of the game as the time ran out, and they pick up a tight 4-point win in that one. We're going to talk about both of those games, look back at the exciting showdowns in those county rivalries this past Friday night, but we've also got another exciting week ahead this Friday night, and that's going to include a game right here at Warrior Stadium, Thompson High School, as they play host to Spain Park in what is another county region battle here between these two teams, and a lot between these two that make this an interesting matchup going into Friday night. Obviously, the Thompson Warriors, one of the best teams in the country so far this season. We'll see if that continues to hold true here in this big battle coming up on Friday. But that's just one of several games to talk about this Friday night. We've still got four teams sitting at 3-0 so far on the season. A strong starts for a lot of our teams here locally, some with just one loss so far this season as well. So a very good beginning to the 2021 season. We're going to talk about all of them, look ahead to what you can expect this Friday night in a loaded region schedule once again. Just been a tremendous start to this football season, and can't wait to kind of see how it continues to unfold moving forward, as we've got some high hopes and expectations following these first few weeks. We're going to talk about all the games coming up this Friday night, look back at what those teams did in the previous week, and we're also going to name our SCR Stars of the Week at the end of the show, so make sure you stay tuned for that as we name the top performers from last week's action. But we're going to dive straight in. We're going to talk about all of our games, and we're going to start right here with our game of the week between Spain Park and Thompson. Well, if we didn't think they were one of the top teams in the country coming into the season, which nationally they were ranked 5th in the country coming into the 2021 high school football season, now we definitely have to start to believe the Thompson Warriors start the season not only 3-0, but with 3 consecutive shutouts. It's the first time in school history that they've started a season with 3 consecutive shutouts, and it's the first time since 1972 that they've done it in the same season, and the third time just in school history that they've even had 3 consecutive shutouts. So a special start for the Warriors to this season, and they've done it on both sides of the ball. It's not just defensively. If you look at what this offense has done so far as well, they've scored at least 55 points in each of their first 3 wins. Obviously 55 in the first 2, and then 58 last week in that win against Tuscaloosa County. That's 168-0 against their first 3 opponents, and they haven't been the strongest competitor so far that Thompson has faced this season. That said, it's going to get more challenging as the season goes along, and that's a strong statement to make early in the season. Last year, the defense struggled a little bit early on in those first few games. The offense was playing pretty well, but this year looks even better. This is an improved team from one that's already won 2 consecutive state championships, which is a scary thought if you look at what's ahead this season as well. Now they get a rivalry battle with county foe Spain Park on Friday night, and it's going to be a tough one for different reasons. This is a Spain Park team that has struggled at times so far this season, but they've also shown some positive signs. And what's going to make this matchup difficult for Thompson is the fact that Spain Park has completely changed their style of play on the offensive side of the football. A team that is now doing more of an option attack, similar to what we've seen at Oak Mountain in the past, at Shelby County High School in the past. That's what you're kind of seeing out of Spain Park so far this year. And for head coach Mark Freeman, he's been open about it. He does not like to face those style of offenses. That said, he's had success in doing so. It's just a matter of that 1 week of the season where you're having to change up your preparation from a defensive standpoint and your game plan standpoint to prepare for something that you don't face on a week-in, week-out basis, and that's something that the Warriors will get. It's an unknown and an unseen going into Friday night against Spain Park. And the Jags at times have looked decent in doing so far this season. In their opener, they come out, they pick up a 37-13 win there against Huntsville. The offense played lights out, and the defense played one of its best performances in several years. A week later, however, came out, played a solid first half against Briarwood. They go into the half trailing 14-8, led 8-7 there midway through the first quarter or second quarter. End up going into the half trailing 14-8, but then they lose the game 42-8, and it was a bad second half, to be honest with you, as the Jags fell to the Lions there in that second week of the season, 42-8. They come back last week, and we see some more positive signs. They fall behind early against Hewitt-Trussville, a top 5 team in the 7A classification, one that had put up 40-plus points in their first 2 games. But Spain Park came back and battled in that game. You look at what they did. They came back, tied that game 17-17. They're really late in the third quarter, but then Hewitt-Trussville put together a strong end to that game, 21 unanswered in the final quarter of that matchup. They win that one 38-17. So Spain Park now coming off back-to-back losses entering this matchup. How do they get back to that team that played so well in the opener, played so well in the first half against Briarwood, and then played extremely well for 3 quarters against Hewitt-Trussville last week, which is probably your closest test to what you're going to see here on Friday night against Thompson. If they can figure out a way to find some consistency there in doing what they were doing well in those games and put it together for 4 quarters, they're going to be in this game. And last year, Spain Park played their best in the biggest games of the season. So we continue to see that last week against Hewitt-Trussville, played a strong performance there for 3 quarters, just faltered there in the fourth quarter. Hewitt-Trussville a little bit deeper of a team, wore them down eventually. So can they step up? They were one of the teams, Spain Park, that challenged Thompson the closest last year in the regular season, a 13-point loss in that game, and had their chances late to tie that before it became a 2-score game there at the end. So this is another opportunity for Spain Park to try to put together one of their best performances against one of their toughest challenges, arguably the toughest challenge that anybody could face in the country. So for Spain Park, the key is going to be that offense. How can they manage that offense to cause issues for Thompson's defense? The best in the country so far this season, 3 consecutive shutouts, 3 defensive players inside the top 15 when it comes to national recruiting, and then you've got 4 total in the top 60 of national recruiting, and several of others in the state that are also there as some of the top players across the state of Alabama. So Spain Park going to have to find ways to kind of slow this game down, find ways to continue to move the chains, churn some clock, keep Thompson's offense off the field, and just find ways to put up some points at the end of each drive, because we know Thompson's going to come out and score points. So whatever Spain Park can do to slow this game down and continue to move the chains is going to be key. And now they're 3 weeks in to this new offensive style. That could be key for them with as far as the experience goes and being able to find some different things offensively that could work in this game. That said, you're going up against one of the toughest defensive lines, one of the toughest linebacking units, and one of the toughest units in the secondary in the entire country. So it's easier said than done. Even with those 3 weeks of experience, you're going to have a tall task to be able to put up a lot of points here against this Thompson defense, and you're going to have to do it because the offense for the Warriors has been solid all year long so far. Spain Park coming off back-to-back games of 38-plus points that they've given up, and you're looking at a Thompson offense that scored 55 or more in the first 3 games of the season. You have to feel like they're at least going to get into the 40s this game, if not higher, which means Spain Park's offense is going to have to find a way to put up a lot of points in this game, and we really just haven't seen that other than the opener against Huntsville so far this season, as they've scored 17 or less against 2 tougher opponents and tougher defenses the last 2 weeks. But you look at that Thompson offense, what they've been able to do so well. They've got about 3 or 4 running backs that have stepped up, and really nobody's had to play a complete game so far this season, which has led to a lot of guys getting experience and that depth continuing to build for the Warriors. You look at Connor Harrell at quarterback. He's played about a half of football each game so far this season, still playing lights out. You've got a plethora of receivers out wide. You look at Ryan Peppins. You look at a guy like Jalen Ward. Justin Pegues has done different things at receiver, running back, kick returner. You've got Brandon Franklin, Leon Cook, Amari Bolden at running back. So many guys on that offensive side that make this team so talented. You got to expect the offense is going to continue to produce. So for Spain Park, your best hope is to keep them off the field and find ways to penetrate that defense and kind of slow this game down so that you can hang around and at least have a chance there in the second half. Like I said, last year they found a way to do that. They had a chance to tie or take the lead there late in that game, ultimately lose by 13. We'll see if they can hang around this year and have similar chances in the second half. You've also got 3 players that were at Spain Park last year now on Thompson's roster, which adds a little bit of fuel to the fire when it comes to this rivalry, county battle and region battle, as these two teams look to cement really a playoff spot early in the season. Both these teams going to be fighting for that. Thompson, on the other hand, looking to battle for a region title. Once again, you can't lose a game early in the season like this with the tough schedule that lies ahead if you want to win that region title at the end of the season. Spain Park, they're going to be battling for a playoff spot each and every week of the season after their 1-2 start to the season, 0-1 start to region play. So a big week for both for different reasons. As Spain Park looks to bounce back, Thompson looks to continue to keep their hype going throughout the rest of the season. Going to be a fun one here between these two county teams here at Warrior Stadium. Well, it's not going to get much bigger than this one for the Oak Mountain Eagles on Friday night as they take on Vestavia Hills in another road matchup for the Eagles early in the season. But man, has Oak Mountain played well in the second half of football games so far. And this one on Friday night may determine a playoff spot here at the end of the season, which makes this a key early season game for the Eagles and for the Rebels, both in different situations entering this game. But you look at Oak Mountain's schedule and what they still have ahead. They still have the gauntlet of taking on Hewitt-Trussville, taking on Hoover, and taking on the Thompson Warriors, 3 of the top teams in the country and 3 of the top 5 teams in the state. Hoover and Thompson sitting back-to-back at 2-1 in the state as well. Hewitt-Trussville just behind them inside the top 5 as well. So a difficult schedule the rest of the way for the Eagles, which makes all of these other games outside of those 3 extremely important for their chances at getting to the postseason this year. And you look at what they did last year. This was a key game in helping them get into the playoffs a season ago. They started 4-0 for the first time in school history. Now they have a chance to do that for the second year in a row, get off to not only a 4-0 start, but more importantly, in my opinion, a 2-0 start to region play. And you've got a good opportunity to do so for multiple reasons. Not only are you taking on a Vestavia Hills team that's sitting at 0-3 so far this season, they're struggling to score points, going up against an Oak Mountain defense that's playing well, and we've seen Oak Mountain play extremely well in the second half of football games so far this season. And I think that's what's going to be the key. Those two things, the defense and continuing to get better as the game goes along. You look at Vestavia Hills so far this season, like I mentioned, 0-3. They've got a 33-3 loss to Mountain Brook, a 9-7 loss to Homewood, and a 34-6 loss to Hoover. So they've changed coaches in the offseason. They've come in, they've tried to do some different things offensively, but the personnel just doesn't seem to be there quite yet for what they want to run, and that could be key again this week. As you look at Oak Mountain's defense playing so well, you got a Vestavia team that hasn't scored more than 7 points in their first 3 games of the season, whereas an Oak Mountain defense that has now given up 19 or less in every game and 7 or less the last 2 weeks. You look at the last 10 quarters of play, this is a team that has given up 13 total points in that span. Obviously a shutout against Pelham 2 weeks ago, and then last week they give up just 7 in a 17-7 win against Gadsden City. And I thought that was going to be a tight defensive physical battle between those two teams. Those were two teams that were playing so well defensively going into that matchup. But Oak Mountain, yet again in the second half, able to make the plays necessary to win that football game. They fell behind 7-0 early, scored 17 unanswered overall to win that game. And you look at what they've done so far in the second half of games this season. They've outscored their opponents 64-6, dating back to Chelsea in the opener. We all saw what happened in that one, 13-13 at the half, scored 33 unanswered in the second half, and then against Pelham, 0-0 at the half, scored 21 unanswered in the second half. And then last week, you look again at what they were able to do, tied 7-7 at the half, and then they come out and scored 10 unanswered in the second half. So this is a team that comes out of the locker room a new team, ready, almost reinvented, rejuvenated, refreshed, and ready to go to put together a strong push to win the football game. And they've done it each of the first 3 weeks of the season. You've got to feel confident about that again this week. An Oak Mountain team that's playing so well defensively against a Vestavia team that's struggling to score points. You also look, Vestavia's defense played well against Homewood in that 9-7 loss there, but overall 33 against Mountain Brook and 34 against Hoover. I would expect them to give up in the 20s in this game. If Oak Mountain's defense can continue to play the way they've played so far, give up 20 or less, they should have a strong chance to win this one, get to 4-0 for the second year in a row, second time in school history, and get off to that all-important 2-0 start in region play. I think the Eagles have a strong shot to do it. They've got the playmakers on offense to make big plays in the second half, so a big chance for Oak Mountain this Friday night to be sitting in great shape at 4-0. Well, two teams this week are going to enter Friday night heartbroken after last Friday. You look at one of those teams, and that's going to be the Calera Eagles, a team that led Pelham 20-7 at the half of the Region County battle last Friday night, going to lose that game 34-30 as they were outscored 27-10 there in the second half. And it was just a tale of two halves. You looked at what Calera was able to do well in that first half against Pelham. Kobe Prentice was unstoppable. 3 touchdowns in that first half, had almost 150 yards combined of offense in the first half. You also look at a guy like Braylon Farrington, a dominant first half, a dominant game from him. Both those guys at receiver, near 150 yards total. You also had Farrington have a 92-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. And then you look back at what Preston Stokes was able to do early in that game. He played extremely well, 300-plus yards passing in that football game with a few touchdowns as well. Had a couple late interceptions, though, and that became key. The defense, they struggled to stop Pelham in the second half as Will Langford came back with a dominant performance there, throwing the football in the second half. Gabe Gamble ran strong for the Panthers as well. Now you've got a Calera team that comes off a heartbreaking loss instead of one that could really boost this team into a playoff position. And I look at Calera and you look at this situation in the past, I think this is something that could send their season in the wrong direction. But we've seen what they've been able to do so far this year. They pick up that win against Demopolis in Game 1, and that just seems to have shifted the attitude around the program. Head coach Jason Hamlin in his first season, he's done a good job of getting these guys ready to go each week. Obviously a tough loss against Jackson Olin 2 weeks ago, but then to bounce back last week and have such a strong chance to win against what I thought was going to be one of the best teams in 6A this year in Pelham, that was a strong performance. And you showed last week what is possible there for the Eagles because of that offensive presence. You look at a guy like Prentice, you look at Preston Stokes, you also have running back Chris Cotton, and now Farrington's busted onto the scene as one of the top athletes as well. They're loaded on that offensive side. The offensive line looked to play extremely well. Also, they've got to find the depth. That's the one thing, depth and stamina. That cost them late last week. It kind of cost them against Jackson Olin. They looked good doing it against Demopolis, but that's a 5A team, and there's a difference jumping up to the 6A classification. So they've got to kind of go back to that opener against Demopolis. Remember the big plays they made late in that game. Exhausted, tired, but they made those plays to win that football game, and that's going to be the key moving forward. And it's going to start this week against Chilton County. This is a strong chance for the Eagles to bounce back. You look at what Chilton County's done so far this season. Lost their opener 34-7 to Central Clay. That's a good Central Clay team. Beat Jemison 40-7, and now coming off a bye week. So there's a little bit of unknown, taking on a Central Clay team that's a classification lower and beating a Jemison team that's just not that strong this year. So we don't really know what to expect from Chilton County. How improved are they this year from last year's team where they took on Calera, and Calera won a tight 24-21 game. But the way I look at it, the Eagles do look to be improved so far this season. The offense playing some great football so far. In Game 1, Kobe Prentice went off. In Game 3, Kobe Prentice went off. And now we've seen other guys step up, too. We know Chris Cotton's got the ability. So to see Braylon Farrington last week, I think that was the key. To see him not only play well on the offensive side, but in the return game, and to see Preston Stokes go over 300 again. This is an offense that's going to get better and better each week as long as they stay healthy and fresh. And that's going to become the key because several of them play on the other side of the football as well. So if Calera can play fresh and have that same offensive presence this week, you've got to feel like they've got a good chance in this matchup against Chilton County because they are improved from what we saw a season ago. I would expect them to come out, have a chance to win this one again. Probably going to be another tight game. So how you handle that stamina, how you handle this week of practice and getting ready for that late stretch there in the third and fourth quarter, that's going to be key for the Eagles throughout this week. We'll see if it pays off against the Tigers this Friday. Just like Calera, the Chelsea Hornets going to enter this week off a tough, heartbreaking loss against rival Briarwood last Friday night. A game they led 35-21 with about 6 minutes to play. Briarwood scored 2 unanswered touchdowns there in those final 6 minutes to tie the game, force overtime, and then in overtime, they come out and they score the only touchdown to win that game, 42-35, and score 21 unanswered after Chelsea had a 2-touchdown lead with about 6 minutes to play. So a difficult, heartbreaking loss. The team was they were gutted. I mean, there's no easy way around it. You got to look at how that game unfolded. It's a rivalry battle. The number 4 team in the state in a region contest, region opener there between those two rivals. And to have a 2-touchdown lead and lose it, that's tough. It's a tough thing to bounce back from, but you have to. I mean, you've still got everything ahead of you. Despite sitting at 0-3, this is a Chelsea team that is drastically improved from what we saw last year, at least from the early stretch of the season. And they finished the season extremely strong in the second half last year. Now's the time to start doing it this year. They've got to start bouncing back. And with what we've seen so far, they've been right there on the verge. And you just competed against a team that many think can win a 6A state championship this year. You had a 2-touchdown lead on them late in the fourth quarter. That tells you everything you need to know right there. This is a Chelsea team that can be as good as they want to be. They've just got to minimize some of the mistakes, and the defensive pressure has to be there late in football games. So far this season, the offense has been lights out other than a few minutes in that Helena game in the first half. They struggled there in week 2, but the opener, we saw what Hayden Garrison did at quarterback. We saw the receivers step up and play extremely well. Thomas Simpson, Cooper Griffin. Last week we saw it again. Those two guys stepped up at receiver. Hayden Garrison stepped up at quarterback. And then you look beyond that at what they were able to do. And Matt Gray stepping up in multiple facets of the game at running back and receiver had a strong performance as well. The offense played extremely well last week. The defense played well for the majority of the game, but then when it mattered in those final 6 minutes, everything just kind of shut down, and it just escaped them. And that's tough to bounce back from, but you look at what you were able to do in that game. You look at the way you played in the first half against now an undefeated Oak Mountain team through the first 3 games, tied 13-13 at the half, and just a few plays early there in the third quarter made the difference in that football game. Against Helena, you fall behind 20-0, and then you bounce back and you get within a score, have a chance to take the lead there late in that game, down 20-14, ultimately lose 27-14. So they were on the verge in those 2 games, and then they took it a step further, played one good half each of those 2 games. Last week they played 3.5 good quarters against Briarwood, the number 4 team in the 6A classification. So you've been on the verge. The next logistical step seems to be to win a football game. And I would not be surprised if that happens this Friday night. This is a very good Homewood football team sitting at 2-1 so far on the season. Beat Hillcrest Tuscaloosa, a thriller to open the season, 37-34. Beat Vestavia Hills in week 2, 9-7. A tight, low-scoring battle that they were able to pull out there in the second half. And then last week, lose to McAdory, who's now 3-0 on the season. They lose that one 45-18. So for Chelsea, you've seen what Homewood can do in tight games. They've won 2 tight games so far. They're late in the second half. So you've got to have the mindset that if it comes down to the wire, you're the better of the 2 teams. You've got to go out there and think you can win this game. We've been against the best teams so far this season. Now it's time for us to show we can win a game late in the contest. Whereas Homewood, coming off the loss to McAdory, struggled last week. Chelsea's got to take advantage of that as well if they want a chance in this one. Homewood may come out a little discouraged after what they were able to produce last week. Chelsea just needs to turn their difficult losses so far this season into fuel, into motivation, and almost anger going into this game, a focused kind of anger that they've got a lot to prove, because this is an important football game now. After losing that opener to Briarwood, now you've got Homewood, arguably your two toughest teams on the schedule in this region. You've still got Mountain Brook ahead too, but those are the two of the toughest teams you're going to face all year in region play. You win this one, and there's no telling what's ahead. You could arguably finish in the top 2 or 3 in this region and cement yourself a playoff spot. That's how big this game could be come the end of the season. So Chelsea going to have to find a way to feel like they've built some confidence, use those close games the last couple of weeks as a building block for what you can do there, especially on the offensive side of the ball. That side's got to be confident. The offensive line's getting better. You've got playmakers stepping up at every position there on the offensive side. Defense still needs to show a little bit of improvement, but they've done that the last couple of weeks. They've showed it at times. Now it's about putting it all together for a complete football game. Would not shock me in the least if Chelsea is able to do that against Homewood and pick up a big, big region win. Ravaged by COVID-19, the Helena Huskies have held true the last 2 weeks. It caused them some major issues against Chelsea a couple weeks ago, but they are able to hold on, pick up a 27-14 win in that game. And then last week, still facing some of those depth issues, but they come out a very good Wetumpka team, low-scoring, physical battle, and they come out on top 20-10 in that one. Now the Huskies sitting at 3-0 overall this season, 1-0 in region play, and a strong chance this Friday night to get to 4-0 overall, 2-0 in region play as they take on Benjamin Russell. You look at the Huskies so far this season, 55-0 win against Dallas County in the opener, 27-14 against Chelsea, and then 20-10 last week against Wetumpka. And the key to those 3 games, if you've noticed one trend, the defense playing extremely well so far this season. They've given up 14 or less in every game. They have a shutout to their name, and they're giving up an average of 8 points per game through the first 3 contests so far this season. Now get a Benjamin Russell team that is 0-3 so far this season. They've lost to a couple of good teams. You look at Huffman, you look at Central Clay, you look at Stanhope Elmore. But this is just going to be a different animal to prepare for when you look at what Helena's defense has done so well so far this season. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball. We know the defense is going to play well. They should come out and hold Benjamin Russell to arguably 20 or less in this game. And then you look at what the offense has been able to do. Mac Turner started the season extremely strong. J.C. Sibley playing extremely well at receiver. Those two guys formed an early connection, and they're playing well so far this season. But Jordan Washington continuing to get better at the running back position, had all 3 touchdowns last Friday, and truly an offensive struggle for the most part for Helena. But he's able to make the difference, a strong, physical, young running back there for the Huskies, and he comes out, scores all 3 touchdowns, helps them get over the top. And then the defense played it well, obviously, also. But you look at what they've been able to do early in the season, show some promise in the passing game. Now they've started to gain some trust in the running game, and the offensive line is getting better each and every week. They're going to eventually put it all together, and this offense is going to become dangerous. And you pair that with what they've got defensively, this is a Helena team sitting undefeated right now. They have hopes of winning this region championship this year after finishing second last year. Didn't get to play against the eventual region champion, which could have determined whether they won the region title last year, and that was coming off the region championship that they won the season before. So top 2 finishes the last 2 years in this region. Now they want to get back to the top of it. They got to win this one if they want to do that, in my opinion, and they should have a strong chance to do so. Just seeing what they've been able to improve on offensively and knowing that defense is as talented as it is, I would expect them to put together a strong performance. This may be their most balanced attack of the season, with guys coming back healthy and refreshed after the last couple of weeks. The way this defense is playing and the offensive improvement that they've shown, I would expect this to arguably be one of the bigger wins that Helena has this season. We'll see if that unfolds on the field. Obviously, a lot of expectation to live up to there, but Helena is a team that you need to keep your eye on. This is a team that's getting better each and every week, especially on the offensive side of the football, and this defense is going to play lights out for the majority of the season. So a big chance for Helena this Friday night to improve to 4-0 and kind of cement themselves as the leader of the pack here in this region. Like the Helena Huskies, the Pelham Panthers have high hopes of winning the region championship this year. This is a Pelham team that made it to that point last year. They won the region title. Now they want to stay on top of this region this season, and last week could go a long way in helping that happen. This is a Pelham team coming off a 21-0 loss to Oak Mountain the week before. They needed that big bounce-back win, and early on it didn't look good. They fell behind 20-7 against county foe Calera, and 2 weeks in a row to that point that Pelham's offense had struggled. The shutout the week before against Oak Mountain, only scoring 7 in the first half against the Eagles a week later, and you're trailing 20-7 at the half. You've got to be reeling and trying to figure out, what can we do? Where are we at? You almost wonder if they were lost and just didn't know what they needed to do to take that next step. But somehow, even with head coach Tom Causey sidelined sitting at home for the game, the Panthers found a way. They came out in that second half, and Will Langford, he just found his groove. He played well at the quarterback position, 5 total touchdowns in that game. Christian Pritchett, Jake Fox, Gabe Gamble, Darius Copeland, all with major contributions there, both in the return game and on the offensive side of the football in the second half. The defense stepped up. A guy like Jamal Miles, who shut down Kobe Prentice in the second half, the Alabama commit who was playing lights out for that game, who eventually ended up cramping up there late in that game as well. Just the way that Pelham bounced back in that second half on both sides of the ball. They scored 27 in that second half, come back and win that one 34-30, as they only gave up 10 in the second half, and that was big. That could go a long way in helping the Panthers repeat as region champions. And this week, another big chance to stay undefeated in region play, get to 3-1 on the season as they take on Stanhope Elmore. We look at what Pelham was able to do so well there in the second half. This is an offense that returns most of its talent from last year, and against Oak Mountain, they struggled. There's no hiding that. They did not play their best football game, but they played so well in the opener against Mortimer Jordan. We've seen some big plays in the offseason and what they've been able to do to prepare for this season, and we saw what they were able to do last year as they won the region championship, and this offense just got better and better as the season went along. This year, returning all those guys, you expected some big things from them, and they just struggled against Oak Mountain, struggled in the first half against Calera, and then they seemed to find it there in the second half, and that's what you've got to hope carries over. You got to have that confidence. You've got to have Langford, who's able to extend plays, who's also able to sit in the pocket comfortably and make plays downfield, because it was easy a lot of the time in the second half last week. There were some really open plays, but at the same time, he had to make quick decisions on a few of those, and it made a big difference there. He's got to be quick with his decision-making. Gabe Gamble's got to have the holes to run through. He's a physical guy, but if you're not creating the holes for him, then you're not going to get a lot of production. And then at the receiver position, those guys have to step up like they did in the second half last week as well. They ran their routes well. They knew what to look for, and they found themselves open on multiple plays, which was crucial there in that comeback. So continuing to do that this week will be key against Stanhope Elmore as the Panthers look to pick up another big win. Stanhope sitting at 2-1 on the season right now. 37-0 win against Selma, 42-20 win against Benjamin Russell, and a 29-0 loss to Prattville. So similar to Pelham, they've lost their 1-7A team that they've played against, and then they've picked up a couple of good wins as well. So you got to expect this is going to be another tight battle. It was a tight battle last year between these two that Pelham won 35-25. So you just never know. This is one's going to go down to the wire, likely going to be a 1 or 2 score game for most of this game. And so late in that contest, you got to expect Pelham to be able to come out, make those big plays in the second half like they did last week. If they can do that, another strong chance to win this Friday night. But it's going to all rest on how this offense plays. Defense has been pretty consistent so far this season. Other than the first half last week and the second half against Oak Mountain, they've played some great football so far on that side of the ball. The offensive consistency has got to be there. They've got to come out and make a statement that we're continuing the trend that we set in the second half last week early in this game. They need to come out and put 14, 20 or more points on the board there in the first half to kind of set the tone for this battle. That could go a long way, not only in creating confidence for this game, but moving forward as well as the Pelham Panthers look to repeat as region champions. Big win for the Briarwood Lions last week. They faced adversity. They hadn't had much of that early in the season, and we don't know how many opportunities they're going to have for that throughout the season, and that's something that could be key for a team that wants to make a run to a state championship. Now, should they have won by a bigger margin? Should they have been in overtime against Chelsea? Those are all questions that we really don't have the answer to because the season's so young, but at the same time, you expected Briarwood to win that game a little bigger, and they didn't. But they faced the adversity. They found the ways to make the plays late in that football game against the Hornets that they needed to not only win a region battle, but a rivalry battle against the Chelsea Hornets, one of their biggest games each and every year of the season. So now sitting at 3-0 overall, 1-0 in region play, the number 4 team in the 6A classification. They still have high aspirations this year, and we saw why late in that game. A team that really struggled overall through the first 3.5 quarters, really, of play. The offense did put up 21 points in that span. Probably thought they would have done enough going into the game to win with that kind of performance the way that their defense has been playing this year, but the defense just didn't play its best game for the majority of that contest. They gave up 35 through those first 3.5 quarters, and Chelsea had a 35-21 lead late in that matchup, 6 minutes to go, but then Briarwood found a way in the final 6 minutes. They scored 14 unanswered, including a 4th and goal from the 10-yard line there on a pass from Christopher Vizina to Luke Rebels that put the Lions in a tie to force overtime in the final seconds of that game. So a huge clutch moment there, and then they come out and they score the only touchdown in overtime, win 42-35, and scored 21 unanswered between the final 5.5 minutes and overtime. So a big end to the game there for Briarwood. That's got to be a huge momentum boost for them moving forward, knowing that they face that kind of adversity. They don't have to hang their heads at any point in the game because they know what they're capable of doing, and we've seen it for the majority of this season on the offensive side of the ball with Christopher Vizina, who was lights out again last week, Luke Rebels, who had somewhat of a slow game for the majority last week, but then big plays there in that final drive and in overtime to help the Lions pull off the win, and the defense finally found their groove late in that game. Despite how tired they were, despite it being overtime, they made the big plays necessary despite not their best game overall last Friday night to win that one. Now they get a Woodlawn team. They should be the heavy favorites in this game. Woodlawn is sitting at 1-2. They've shown improvement from years past with a win early in the season against Carver, but overall against their 2 toughest opponents, this is a team that's lost 50-0 and 49-0. So Briarwood, the way their offense is playing, we know how talented their defense usually is. They should bounce back, ready to get some more momentum this week and get their confidence back. Against Woodlawn, expect Briarwood to pick up a big win. I would see them winning this one going away. But the key is to get some of that confidence back, build off of last week's finish, and carry that into some big games that you have coming up. You still got Homewood. You still got Mountain Brook on the schedule. So a lot ahead for the Lions as they have arguably their most difficult game still left to be played. Got to get their confidence back and be ready to go as they look to bounce back from a subpar performance last week, one that they finished strong, started slow. Now they've got to get back in that groove that they showed the first couple weeks. Expect that to happen this Friday night, and expect the Lions to continue to remain a threat for the 6A title. Well, Zeb Ellison's welcome home party went extremely well last Friday. The former player for the Shelby County Wildcats, now head coach at his alma mater, he returns into Papa McComb Stadium, and Shelby County picks up a big region win to start region play, 35-22 against Sipsey Valley, and they didn't, by any stretch of the imagination, play their best game in that matchup. A lot of mistakes and a lot of costly things in that game, but they ended up making the plays to win that football game, and that's something they can build off of. We didn't play our best game, but we still won by 13 points, and I expect that to be a big emphasis from Ellison throughout this week and moving forward throughout the season, showing what's possible if they do end up playing their best game. Sitting at 1-1 now, lost to Montevallo in the opener, competed in that game for a long time, but then just fell short there late there with some big plays from Joseph Anderson for the Bulldogs. So sitting at 1-1, sitting at 1-0 in region play, and now they've got another toss-up game this Friday night against Selma. This is a Selma team sitting at 1-2, 37-0 loss, a 44-16 loss, and a 12-6 win against Marbury. So what we've seen so far from Selma is struggles offensively. We've seen them score 16 or less in their first 3 games. Now, Shelby County's defense has struggled at times so far this season, but I expect that to change. I expect them to improve on that side of the ball as the season goes along, and I also expect that on the offensive side. Connor Aderholt started to show some really positive signs last week at the quarterback position for the offense for Shelby County. Expect that to carry into this week. Expect the defense to continue to improve each and every week with some new faces on that side of the ball. I expect this to be a strong chance for Shelby County to get to 2-0 in region play. It's not going to be easy, but this should be similar to a game last year. At least keep the Wildcats close when they lost 12-10 a season ago, a 2-point game last year. Defensive, physical slugfest a season ago. Offense has improved a little bit early this season. The defense, not quite where they were last year, but going up against a Selma team that's not playing well on the offensive side of the football. I expect this to be a tight battle. We'll see if Shelby County can make those second-half plays to pull out a win. The Montevallo Bulldogs in need of a big bounce-back win this Friday night, and it's not going to be an easy task taking on Bibb County. The Bulldogs, they're coming off a 41-10 loss to American Christian last week, and that was a game in which I thought they were going to compete a little closer later in that game. Now, they did play extremely well for a half of football and played well into the second half, but American Christian just had a little bit more depth, a little bit more stamina to put that game away late. So now the Bulldogs in need of a big bounce back this week if they want to have a chance at one of those top 2 spots in this region, a position I think they believe they can get to this year under second-year head coach Blake Bourne, with a lot of their talent back from last season as well, in a season in which they finished 3rd in the region and made the second round of the playoffs. So we'll see what they're able to do in this game on Friday night, but Bibb County always a contender for the region championship. American Christian and Bibb County seem to sit on top of this region most years, and now a big chance for Montevallo to really insert their name into that mix. Obviously, last week didn't go the way they wanted to, but probably a little better of an opportunity this week against Bibb County. This is the Montevallo team. Last week they fell behind 7-0 at the end of the first. It was 14-3 at the half, still sitting in that game, but then they just struggled there in the second half. But still an improvement from what we saw last year. Lost that game to American Christian 63-31 a season ago, so the defense has shown some improvement. The offense, not where they wanted to be at that point in the season, but Joseph Anderson still over 100 yards. They've got to find that next guy there on the offensive side to step up if this team wants to take that next step, and it's got to happen in a hurry this Friday night if they want to take down Bibb County. The defense has shown some progression so far this season, but Bibb County playing extremely well. They're sitting at 3-0, and they've given up 20 or less for an average of 10.7 points per game so far this season. So Montevallo going to have to find a way to bounce back offensively in a big way this week if they want to have a chance. Another thing they need to do, that defense needs to keep this game lower scoring, because Bibb County's not going to give up a ton of points. Anderson's been the highlight of the offense for Montevallo so far this season, and until they find that next weapon, that next option there on the offensive side of the football, they've got to have that defense keeping these games low scoring, giving that offense a chance to make the big plays that they need to. Now, if Anderson comes down and wears down Bibb County, if he comes out and does that, that could lend itself to a strong second half for the Bulldogs on both sides of the ball, because they would have a freshness upper hand there late in that game. But Bibb County scored 27 or more in each game so far this season. So it's going to be one of the toughest challenges on Montevallo's schedule this season. We'll see if they're able to keep this game in their wheelhouse, if Anderson can wear down that Bibb County defense, and if they can put up that point total that they're kind of accustomed to early in the season. It's going to be a big week for the Bulldogs. They need this one to try to compete for a region championship, to try to compete for one of those top 2 spots in this region. I think they're pretty angry. I think they're ready to bounce back. I think this is going to be a tighter game than many may expect. Montevallo is going to have their chances in the second half. It's just a matter of coming out refreshed and making the changes they need to in order to come out and pull away in the second half for the Bulldogs. Could be a big opportunity for them to pick up an upset victory and cement themselves as a strong contender for one of those top 2 spots. Another team that's going to come into this week off a heartbreaking loss, the Vincent Yellow Jackets, a game that they really had in control for the most part last week, led 29-7 against Ramburn at the half of that football game. They led late in the football game as well, but ultimately a minute and 30 left, and they had the lead. Looked like they got a big turnover on downs, a big 4th down stop. We're going to get the ball back, but I believe a roughing the passer continued that drive, kept the drive alive for Ramburn, and they capitalized. They scored in the final minute to win that game 36-35, and head coach Lucas Weatherford after the game said depth just caught up with Vincent there in the second half, a team that had played so well defensively early in the season in those first couple of games. Last week, playing well at the half, only gave up 7 points, looked like they were really taking a strong turn toward a contender this year, and then they just came out flat defensively in the second half, didn't put up the same offensive production, and that's always been a struggle at Vincent just because they don't have the depth and stamina of a lot of other schools. They've got to play everybody on both sides of the ball for the majority of the game, and that's such a difficult thing to do no matter how athletic and talented you are, and that's something Vincent's got to build off of. They got to see what they've done early in the season. They're still sitting at 2-1, and I know they're 0-1 in region play, but they're heading into a 2-game stretch in which they won both games last year after forfeiting their first 3. So they set at 2-3 through 5 games last year. This year they need to be in better position. They need to be sitting at 4-1 after these next 2 games, and that's going to start this week with the matchup against Horseshoe Bend. So Horseshoe Bend team sitting at 1-2 right now on the season. Lone win being a forfeit win. So they technically have not played all 3 games so far and have only won the one that they didn't play. Their 2 losses so far this season, lost 27-7 to Wadley and 28-21 against Fayetteville. So they're struggling to score points. Vincent's defense has shown drastic improvement from what it was last year, arguably one of their best defenses in the last 10 years there at Vincent. So this is a big week for them to show back up on that side of the ball. For the offense, Trey Youngblood, Jamari Lawson still playing good football. For those guys to kind of pick the team up on the offensive side, Blake Allums as well. Those guys need to be ready to go on the offensive side, and the defense needs to get back to what they were doing those first couple of weeks, what they did in the first half last week of that football game. I think there's plenty of opportunity for Vincent to win this football game. They need to win this football game, and it could go a long way in helping them earn a spot in the playoffs this season. I expect the Yellow Jackets to come out with a point to prove. This is a team that's much better than they were last year on both sides of the ball, and now it's about going out, winning these games that you know you're supposed to win, and having the confidence to do so, even off a heartbreaking loss. You can't let last week affect what you do this week. Vincent needs to bounce back. I expect them to do so. They've got the talent this year, and they're improved enough to win this football game and improve to 3-1 in overall and 1-1 in region play. So a big opportunity for the Yellow Jackets this Friday. Before we get to our SCR Stars of the Week, we're going to run down our AISA and ACSC teams and what you can expect from this Friday night and how they fared last Friday night as well. Looking at the Cornerstone Chargers, they get a matchup with Crenshaw Christian this Friday night, the defending state champions in this AISA region. And look at Cornerstone last week. They forfeit that game, didn't get to take the field last Friday night. Now sitting at 1-2 overall this season, with that forfeit loss to Lakeside last week, get the defending state champ this week. And the offense for Cornerstone has struggled early in the season, whereas Crenshaw has played so well on the defensive side of the football. They've given up just 10-7 through their first few games of the season. So their defense playing extremely well. The offense not as potent as it has been in years past, 35-22 in their 2 wins so far this season, but that defense playing so well. We'll see if Cornerstone enters this game a little bit refreshed after last week's forfeit loss, not having to play a week ago. Should this game be played this Friday night, that could be key in helping them at least hang around against an offense that's not scoring a ton of points this season. Coosa Valley Rebels, they played Crenshaw last week. Now they get Lakeside this Friday night. The Rebels showing some improvement. Forfeited week 1. They're now 0-3, but the defense has played extremely well so far this season. Lost 35-14 to a very, very good Pickens team. And then last week against Crenshaw, the defending state champions in this region of the AISA, they lose 22-7, a game they lost 63-0 last year. So a big turnaround there in that matchup. Now get their best chance of the season against Lakeside. They're going to have a chance to win this football game. It would be the first with head coach Vince DiLorenzo back at the helm there for the Rebels. Don't be surprised if it happens against Lakeside on Friday. The Evangel Lightning, they take on North River this Friday night. The Lightning forfeit win last week. They're now 3-1 overall on the season, and they get a North River team that has struggled so far. Losses of 49-22, 84-7, 36-9, and 60-8. This is an Evangel team that their offense isn't as potent as it's been in years past, but it's still an offense that can run the ball extremely well, and they're getting better in the passing game. This is a very talented football team year in and year out, and the defense is very physical and strong. They're going to have their way in this one. I expect Evangel to pull away for a big win. Now it's time for SCR Stars of the Week segment, and last week was a big one. Your Stars are expected to step up in region play, help your teams battle for a playoff spot, and some of the best did that last week. We're going to run down classification by classification, name the top players from this past Friday night's action, and we're going to start in 7A with the Thompson Warriors. Connor Harrell didn't have to do a ton. He still had another consistent and accurate night, 4 of 7, 175 yards and 2 touchdowns, and basically a half of football there for the Warriors in that 58-0 road win against Tuscaloosa County. His top target, who had most of the yards there in the receiving game for the Warriors, Ryan Pepins, 3 receptions, 168 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's going to be a force to reckon with this season there for the Warriors as they enter some of these bigger games the rest of the way. And Amari Bolden, another guy, we've seen their running back depth. We've seen Leon Cook. We've seen Brandon Franklin. And now Amari Bolden steps up, 6 carries, 96 yards for 2 touchdowns last Friday for the Warriors. That offense is loaded, and that didn't even get me to the defense, who everybody had a pretty consistent night and didn't have to do a ton there as they posted their 3rd consecutive shutout to take down Tuscaloosa County 58-0, now have won their first 3 games by a combined score of 168-0. The Oak Mountain Eagles and Evan Smith continue to roll. Smith, another big night, 17 carries, 179 yards, and a touchdown. Had close to 100 yards passing and an additional touchdown through the air. He was pretty much the offense in that win for the Eagles, a low-scoring physical battle against Gadsden City that they win 17-7, and he stepped up and made some big plays there for the Eagles, while the defense continued to show just how talented they are this season as well. Moving on to the 6A classification, the Pelham Panthers had a plethora of guys step up in that win, that comeback win against Calera in the second half. Will Langford had 5 touchdown passes, 4 in the second half of that game. Just a lights-out performance from him. And some of those passes, a couple of them were a little bit more wide open, but they were accurate, deep downfield passes. And then there were others where he had to make a quick decision. The RPO, he steps up, he pulls that ball back in, and he fires a rocket to Christian Pritchett twice there in the second half for touchdown passes, and they were right on the numbers. Perfect passes with quick decision-making. He played extremely well. And then you look at Jake Fox, 3 touchdown catches in that game. A couple of them went for more than 50 yards. A strong showing from him. Christian Pritchett, 2 touchdown catches, both in the second half, both around the 10-yard line, but they were fast, strong, quick balls that he had to be ready for, and he didn't know if he was going to get them. So big playing from those guys on the offensive side of the ball. Also going to mention Gabe Gamble. He played well and was really physical and toted the ball a lot in that game from the running back position for the Panthers. On the other side of the ball for the Panthers, Jamal Miles stepped up in a big way. We'll talk about Kobe Prentice in just a second, but in the second half, the whole game, Miles had the task of handling and locking down Prentice, and he struggled a little bit early in that game. But in the second half, Prentice was cramping up a little bit, and Miles took advantage. He did not let up, and he ended up shutting him down in the second half. That was big in their attempt at a comeback and to be able to pull off that comeback victory. Miles was very crucial there on the defensive side of the ball to slow down that passing attack that was so potent in the first half for the Eagles. And we're going to talk about that Calera offense and what they did now with Kobe Prentice, 6 touches in that game, 158 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had two touchdowns of more than 50 yards in that game in the first half, and then had another 19-yard catch there in the first half as well. Just a strong performance, and he was putting the Pelham defenders on skates in the first half as he started strong in that one. It was a lot of fun to see his performance and his ability there for Calera in that game. Braylon Farrington, though, also stepped up. He now adds a second dimension on that offense. 9 catches, 140 yards, and then added a 92-yard kickoff return for a touchdown as well. You look at what he does, you look at what Prentice does. Those two guys now extremely athletic and fast. It's going to be a dangerous Calera offense moving forward, and they've got a solid quarterback in Preston Stokes, who went 19 of 35, 322 yards, and 2 touchdowns there in the loss for Calera. So if they can put that kind of offensive performance together for a complete game, this is a team that's going to be dangerous the rest of the way for the Eagles. At Helena, Jordan Washington, he continues to improve as a young running back there for the Huskies. Didn't put up a ton of yards in that win last week, around 75 yards, but he did have all 3 touchdowns in the 20-10 win against Wetumpka, and that was big. But we've talked all season about Helena's defense, and 2 guys really stepped up big time in that win. Peyton Woodall, 11.5 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. And then you look at Joseph Roberto, one of the top returning linebackers in the state, in the county this year, and he put together a strong showing. 11 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, and 1 sack in that game. He's going to be a guy to watch out for the rest of this season there for the Huskies on that defensive side at the linebacker position. Strong showing from him and the entire Helena defense last Friday night. In their comeback win, Briarwood's Christopher Vazina, another big showing, 14 of 20, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns, passing the football, 19 carries, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns running the football. So 4 total touchdowns there. He's now gone over 200 all-purpose yards between passing and running the football in each of the first 3 games for Briarwood this season. Continues just a torrid pace. And the biggest key last week was what we saw from Jay Butler. They need a receiver to step up. They need that go-to target outside of Luke Rebels, who's a crossover running back receiver, can do everything they need him to do, but they need that second option, and Butler stepped up. 6 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown there for Briarwood as he gave Vazina a top target out wide on a night where Luke Rebels didn't play his best, yet still had a good night as well. So if they can get Butler and a couple other guys out wide to step up, that's going to be crucial in what this team can do from an offensive standpoint the rest of the season. In the loss, the Chelsea Hornets, another strong showing on the offensive side of the football. Hayden Garrison, 19 of 29, 325 yards, and 3 touchdowns passing the football. He continues to showcase some strong abilities there at the quarterback position. Then you look at a guy like Matt Gray, who really stepped up. He's one they need to step up in addition to Thomas Simpson and Cooper Griffin. Gray had 13 carries, 49 yards, and then 4 catches for 92 yards and a touchdown. So a strong showing from him as he neared 150 all-purpose yards. They need him to play strong both at running back and in the receiving game. That can really open up what this team can do because they've got a guy in Griffin who can play tight end. He can play out wide. That gives you somebody on one side of the ball and out in the field. And you got Thomas Simpson, who had another big night, 5 catches, 88 yards, and 1 touchdown, adds a big downfield threat on the other side as well. So this is an offense that continues to grow, continues to learn things about themselves, and show improvement there for the Hornets. Expect that to be a big key the rest of the season. Final guy, final SCR Star of the Week. We've mentioned him the first 2 weeks of the season, and even though they lose 41-10, you got to mention Joseph Anderson. Still went over 100 yards on 22 carries, had 145 yards in that loss last week against American Christian. He's now got close to 800 yards rushing through 3 weeks of the season, almost a 1,000-yard back already. That's impressive. He's a guy that you'll have to keep your eye on the rest of the season. If Montevallo is able to go on and finish with just 1-2 losses here in the regular season, make a run in the playoffs, he could be a guy you look at for one of the top players in the state at the end of the season. That's how important he is to the Bulldogs. We'll see if they have anybody else step up in a big game against Bibb County this Friday night. That's going to do it for SCR Stars of the Week segment. Another big week this Friday night as we look to see standout players step up, make a difference, and help their teams pick up a win. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Shelby County High School Football Show. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in as we get you geared up for what's going to be another special night of high school football across Shelby County. We've got some of the best teams in the state this year, and they continue to prove that each week so far. Through the first 3 weeks, like I said, we still have 4 undefeated teams so far this season. Region play is here. It was exciting last week. It's going to be exciting from here on out as we get ready for what should be an exciting 2021 season and hopefully an exciting 2021 postseason as well. So the season just underway, 3 weeks in. We go into week 4 with high expectations for several teams. We'll see how many can bounce back. We'll see how many remain undefeated and what things look like after this Friday night. We'll see you here live with our pregame show on Facebook Live at Shelby County Reporter on our Facebook page before this big game between Spain Park and Thompson, our game of the week. We'll get you geared up for all the games live here on Friday night. But until then, that's going to do it from Warrior Stadium.